Let's go, let's go, let's go. Gather round, gather round, gather round. I still have a little bit of voice left. It is Sunday night in East Lansing, Michigan for a very, 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 very special holiday edition of the SpartanMag Live. Come on in, gather around. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Going to be talking Michigan State football, Michigan State football, Michigan State football, Michigan State football, and Michigan State football fans. Today is the first day of the rest of your football life. Big news at Michigan State today. You know what's going on. We've been covering it over at SpartanMag.com. For the last few weeks, been hinting here and there, talking about Fitzgerald, talking about the situation, the percentages of what was going to happen, coaching change-wise. And, it went from 80-20 that they might be keeping Smith because there was a lot of that was put out through donors 3 weeks ago. And then after Paul Konendijk and I did a VCast after the game in Iowa City, talking about looking like Smith was going to be coming back for better or for worse for some people that are out there. And then after I finished with that podcast, like 30 minutes after, while I was in the press box, received indications from two different reliable sources saying, no, this thing had turned and Pat Fitzgerald was very much in line to get something going. Couldn't name him by name at that point, but in the tagline here at the YouTube channel, I pinned at the top of that VCast, if you go back and look at it, that after this VCast concluded, we heard what we heard without giving specifics, and I was back to 50-50. Then it went to 60-40 late last week, and then this morning from our hotel room outside of Detroit, Michigan, after Michigan State's victory over Maryland, I got up in the morning, heard some things, and went to 90-10, and when that happened, you guys knew what was going on. Posted a couple things, jumped in the car, came home, shoveled some snow for a second, went over, staked out a few places, talked to some Michigan State football players. I was hoping to run into Jonathan Smith, never saw him, but I did some writing over in East Lansing in the parking lot outside the football building all day, so I still have my shoveling snow attire on. Just finished writing another story. It's 10:15, 10:20 p.m. Eastern time. I was hoping to get this thing kicked off around 8. It's been delayed, but we're taking questions over here in the Super Chat area. We might have the great Dorset Cleese the Wise on with us as well. A lot of Michigan State fans are happy about the news. First of all, Jonathan Smith's a good man. He's always treated us professionally, us in the media, me in particular. I appreciate that. Stand-up guy, always treated us with respect, which is not always the case with coaches and media. Jonathan Smith, a good guy. And I hope for nothing for the best for him and his family, good family. And the silver lining for the Smiths is that they get to see their dad, their father a lot now. I know he's very close with his daughter. I think she's in the 11th grade. He has time to and he's well compensated. He did well enough as a coach to get that big contract from Michigan State. Got a shot at it. And I'm not going to say that it wouldn't have never turned around. It maybe could have. I think he's a good coach. I think he was, he's the sideline demeanor, he was casual. And some of that casualness seeped into other areas of the team, and it held them back for 2 years. Eventually could have gotten straightened out, I think so, but he had lost the fan base, and you really can't drive a big rig like Michigan State with the fan base headwind like that. I'm not saying it's the fans' problem or their fault. That's just college football in this day and age. So I wish him the best. It's a good man. And, one of the regrettable things is when things go sour for a football team, fans get angry and they get mad at the coach personally. And some coaches deserve it. It's okay. He'll be the first to say, hey, you buy your ticket, you have the right to boo. You bought the ticket, you have the right to give up on us and do whatever you want to do and be mean and cruel. He's not going to claim any that he should be above that or anything. He's not going to blame anyone on that. But a guy that never offered excuses, but a good coach. I think he'll coach again someday. But hey, silver lining, he's well paid and he's got some time, some family time now, so good for him, and I wish him well. He's a good man, like I've said for the 5th time. Let's go straight to the chat area, the tip jar, super chat area. We got Top JDS 1492. He's got a tip jar donation here to the cause at Spartan Mag. $4.99. Thank you for that tip jar. By the way, my name is Jim Comparoni, publisher of SpartanMag.com. Jim Comparoni, SpartanMag.com. SpartanMag.com is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State sports. That is the Underground Bunker message board. That is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State sports. It is the daily narrative and the hourly narrative and the minute-by-minute narrative of what's going on with Michigan State sports. And the church of Michigan State sports today, it's all about Pat Fitzgerald. inching toward becoming the next head coach at Michigan State. Go to SpartanMag.com. Great offer right now, 50% off right now, Cyber Monday deal, 50% off, SpartanMag.com. That's less than $60 for the year. You will love the subscription, and with it, you get free access to The Athletic and the fine work that those ladies and gentlemen do over there. All right, top JDS 1492 says, can you outline what you've heard in regards to improvements to NIL and Michigan State's overall alignment for football? Thanks, Jim. You're the best. I appreciate the support. I've not heard anything specifically about NIL, but it's been a loose ball fumble at Michigan State for more than a couple of years, 3 years, basically since the onset of it. It's changing a little bit. We know that there were some iterations of it in the past, and Alan Haller kept it at arm's length for NCAA rules. The irony there is that Alan Haller wanted so badly to not commit any NCAA violations. That was very important to him. He did not want the program to go on probation on his watch. So he's a law enforcement guy by trade, did not want to do anything that was against the rules in terms of overseeing NIL. Had nothing to do with it. So what happened with NIL? It was disjointed, unorganized. You know what happened with the Spartans Dogs for Life and what happened there in 2023 after the Mel Tucker debacle. So there were other iterations that were attempted, and now J-Bat wants to do it within the guidelines and the guardrails, and that's going to take a lot of creativity to make that happen if others are operating outside the line. But I'm hearing that, and I heard about this a few days ago, and I didn't want to mention it on the message boards because a lot of people would have been saying, well, okay, we've heard this before. Why is this one going to be any different? And I don't have any proof it's going to be any different. But I'm hearing that one particular big wig donor has basically stepped forward and said, okay, enough is enough. I got my people. We're on it. We're going to handle this. And there's a lot of confidence there. So will that be an NIL thing outside the guardrails? But in the gray areas, I'm not sure. But there's a lot of optimism now. And as Michigan State set out to attract a new coach, they needed to show that that was in order. And I don't have proof or particulars or specifics, but you're asking me what I've heard in regards to improvements in NIL. I'm just hearing that there is a new iteration, and that's looking pretty good. I'm also hearing, you've all heard also that fundraising, and some of you have donated a lot, fundraising is going really well. That's what J-Bat came to Michigan State to do. That's his specialty. And part of, he's a great organizer that way. He's got great imagination, creativity. It's a pragmatist in a lot of ways in that area, in that space. Meanwhile, a very amiable, agreeable personality. And if you're around him a while, as the boosters and donors have been, after a while, he's a likable guy. And that's you have to be that in order to be a good fundraiser. You gotta like being around the guys. And he's done a good job. I've heard from donors on some of the trips they've already had. So you have those things working together, and fundraising is it's on the cusp of some record-breaking things. I heard last week that there was something that was going to be announced for the Duke game, and then that kind of broke this week, and you guys have heard some of those things. I'm not exactly what the numbers are, but I'm anticipating the biggest donation in the history of Michigan State athletics, so stay tuned for that. Will that be incorporated with some naming rights changes at the stadiums? At some point it will be. I'm not sure if that one has something to do with this. That'll happen at some point, but they're expecting a big announcement probably this week for the Duke game. What have I heard about improvements for NIL and Michigan State overall alignment for football? I think with these, I've heard, but I've not confirmed it with Michigan State sources, that some of these donations are going to be done for stadium improvements, Breslin Center improvements, and maybe even some reimagination of the space over at Jennison Fieldhouse. So that's going to be part of it. Can some of that money be fashioned in NIL? In terms of, J-Bat's always going to want to do it in terms of real name, image, and likeness as it's supposed to be, with real sponsorships, not just Billy Bob Oil bringing a guy in to sign 2 autographs in 10 minutes and giving him $2 million. So they're going to try to operate within the rules. There's my understanding, but there is a lot of optimism there. Thank you for your super chat. Now let's check it out. Wait a minute. Am I reading this right? Am I reading this? Wait a minute. Holy cannoli. What's going on? C.B. Stevenson. That's my buddy C. Brian Stevenson. Man, when you're in town, look me up. We'll go over to Beggar's Banquet and have a couple refreshments, and we'll talk a little off the record. Buddy, look at you. $499.99 American dollars, ladies and gentlemen. Goodness gracious. I mean, I mean, thank you. Really, thank you. That really helps our small business a lot. And it was Small Business Saturday yesterday. And we are a mom and pop with 2 or 3 full-timers looking for trying to square away another one. Thank you, C. Brian, for that generous Merry Christmas super chat. He says, pay it forward and keep smiling. Thank you. Really appreciate it, man. That's great. Thank you. That's outstanding. Caleb Tallman, let's see what he's got here. Wait, is that the one? My bad. Whoops, excuse me. Was that? Didn't mean that. Where are we? There we go. One more. Caleb Tallman, super chat from Caleb Tallman. That's WNC Sparty on the Mag from Western North Carolina. He says, in your years, as for the day of the hire, where does this one rank as far as your optimism for Michigan State football? Excuse me, I should have hit the cough button for that. Optimism, that's a good question. I was around when Saban was hired, and I was a young cub reporter, Spartan Magazine, first go-round, and I didn't know much about Nick Saban, but one of my mentors, the great Jack Ebling, did, and I respected and still respect Ebling's outlook on football, basketball, and a lot of things. He's a good one. He's a Hall of Famer. I get a lot. Guy cracks me up. Good friend of mine. Good man. Ebling. I remember another good friend of mine, the great Jim Szymanski, number 91, out of Sterling Heights, I think it was. Remember the Rose Bowl team? He's still around town. I need to see him soon. Exchange texts with him a lot. Need to sit down, have a coffee with him soon. Big Jim, if you're watching, love you. Hope to see you soon. Anyway, knew Szymanski from way back in the dorm days, and around that time when Saban was hired, a few days after that, we were in the football building, and Szymanski was in there. He had been working out in the weight room. This is 1994, December of 94. Szymanski graduated in like 91. He might have just finished his NFL career. That was November. Maybe he had just finished his NFL. He played with the Broncos for a while. I think the Steelers a little bit. If I remember right, he was coming out of the weight room at Michigan State, and Ebling was there, and the three of us were talking, and Ebling had said before Saban was hired, if they hire Saban, Michigan State will be in a New Year's Day bowl game within 5 years. That was big talk. New Year's Day bowl game was the holy grail at that time. You had to be pretty much a top 15 team to play New Year's Day. Top 14. Doesn't sound that astronomical these days. Back then, that was high pie for Big Ten teams. Usually had 1 or 2 Big Ten teams. Big Ten wasn't all that strong back then. That was quite a prediction. And I think Jack had said that previously. Szymanski was coming through, and Szymanski had been on the Rose Bowl team. He had been on the defense when Saban was coordinator. And I know Szymanski for a long time, but we never talked about Saban. And he was like, Coach Saban, he's going to take Michigan State to a New Year's Day bowl game within 5 years. So these two gentlemen that know a lot about football were saying the exact same thing. So I was just deferring to them. So I was pretty optimistic for Michigan State also. And you could tell when he was hired that things, Perlis ran a buttoned-up toughness, operation of toughness, but things got a little bit more tightly screwed when Saban came in. Immediately improved offensive line, I thought, with Jim Bowman is the new offensive line coach, strength coach with Ken Manny coming in. That really improved. Just a lot more accountability. So there was a lot of initial optimism there, and hearing those two guys say that, there's a lot of optimism there. When Bobby Williams was hired, that was like an experiment. Just kind of, hire from within, keep it rolling. He was going to delegate, and he needed to have great coordinators around him. And Bill Miller and Morris Watts, they were what they were. They were okay. But Bobby Williams was not a disciplinarian, and as players got in a little bit of trouble, he did not come down on them, and it eventually flew out of control, and it was hard to win football games in that fashion. And I got to tell you, just a couple of weeks after Bobby Williams was hired, I remember being over to the football building, and I love Bobby Williams too. And if he's watching, I hope you're well. Good guy also. I just got to say, my observation soon after he was hired in December of 1999, Michigan State went on and beat Florida in the Citrus Bowl that year in a New Year's Day bowl game, making good on that prophecy from Mr. Ebling and Mr. Szymanski that Michigan State would be in a New Year's Day bowl game within 5 years, and they were in year number 5. and Saban took the job at LSU. And I remember, we were in the football building covering bowl practice. In those days, those 15 practices, regimented and valuable. Would be able to see a little bit of practice maybe here and there and talk to players or whatever, getting ready to play Florida. And being in the hallways, you'd request players and there'd be interviews and people were coming through, and we're kind of in the middle of the intersection. You really got a feel for the football building, the comings and goings. These days, we're a lot more sequestered away from it. Back then, we were right in the hallways. And Saban had been gone for maybe 10 days. And you could tell. It was like substitute teacher situation. There was just a lot more yelling and clowning around and stuff. It was loose. And they played loose against Florida with a lot of talent, beat a good Florida team, but over the course of time, that looseness and the substitute teacher syndrome, nothing against substitute teachers out there. It's a tough job and got respect for you. I'm just using it as an analogy. But things had gotten loose, tires got flat, and there was hope and there was, interest that, recruiting could really take another step, but went south. The John L. Smith, a lot of people were like, when he was hired, the way he came in, the way that news broke, while watching his bowl team lose, get blown out by somebody, and just a lot of people had not heard of him, and he'd, John L. Smith, another good guy, but, loose cannon, like Paul Konerdijk likes to call him, minor 49er, rootin' tootin' Yosemite Sam guy. He had a method of doing things, and I was like, okay, this could work, but it wasn't quite the optimism that when Saban came in. But had a really good first year. John L. Smith was Big Ten Coach of the Year in year one. Where they go 9-3, 8-4. And then when he was fired, then D'Antonio came in, and I knew D'Antonio well. 18-17 record at Cincinnati. And I remember watching their game against Rutgers when Rutgers was a top 10 team. And Cincinnati's record was not great, but it was good. And they were a mid-major at the time. And I think they had just joined the Big East, maybe. So they were moving up from a group of 5 to the Big East. They're moving up in weight class. And Rutgers had one of their all-time teams, top 10 undefeated, and Cincinnati upset them in Nippert Stadium. I went back and rewatched that game after John L. Smith was fired, and I was watching Cincinnati, and they looked like Youngstown State. It was trestle ball, and that brand of football speaks to me. I think it's beautiful. I think beating a team 14-9 is beautiful, and they were just tight and good and buttoned up and square and tackled. They had a middle linebacker named McCullough, and they were just solid all the way around, made no mistakes. I remember going to the Tom Izzo radio show after I saw that. And Izzo sometimes would share, what he's thinking about this coach and that. He loves talking about that. Sometimes he's included in all that stuff. Sometimes he's not. And he had a big hand in this coaching search. And this one, I went over to the which I don't normally do. I went over to the radio show, the Izzo radio show, waited for it to get over. He was coming off. I was like, Tom, did you see the Rutgers-Cincinnati game? I go, Cincinnati, look, you know what they look like? They look like a Big Ten team. And I just remember having that conversation. He was just kind of like nodding. I mean, he wasn't going to share what was in his mind and what was going on. And D'Antonio at that time was not the lead candidate. I do remember also going to watch another coaching candidate that I won't name right now. Went and saw him, came back and was impressed with a lot of things. And I mentioned that to Izzo after basketball practice one time. Because Izzo, after basketball practice, sometimes during these coaching searches, when he's done talking basketball, he'll turn the cameras off. All right, what are you guys hearing? What do you think? And we'll talk about those things. Oh, we got Dorsicles the Wise chiming in. Not sure what's going on here. Matt, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I can't hear you. Matt, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I cannot hear you for some reason. Not sure why. Is this plugged in? Oh, maybe now. Can you hear me, Matt? Matt.
I can hear you.
All right. Yeah, we're plugged in now. It wasn't plugged in. Matt, I'll get to you in a moment. Thanks for calling in. Do you have a minute? I'm going through a couple of things right quick.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
All right. So I was telling a story about when talking to Izzo about other coaching searches and so forth, and he'll shoot the bull with us here a little bit here and there. And then this one coach that I went and saw, I came back and I was like, man, this guy impressed me with this and that and this and that. I could tell by the look on Izzo's face, he was like, yeah, that's not the guy. That he never said that, but that was my read on that. Someday I'll tell you who that coach was. Maybe next week I will. What do we have here? So the question I'm fielding, Matt, is where the optimism currently ranks compared to other coaching hires. So that's why I'm talking about past coaching hires going one by one. The ones I've experienced over the years, beginning with Saban, then Williams, and then John L. Smith, and D'Antonio, and Tucker. Tucker, there was optimism there too. You had the 1 year at Colorado, didn't go great, but the resume was pretty good, having coached for Smart and Saban, had been a coordinator for Smart. All that looked pretty good. Had been been an award-winning recruiter at Georgia, came in with a high optimism of what Michigan State could be. So that was a noble undertaking for him to shoot as high as he did, and had a lot of success there for 2 years, and then took his hands off the wheel, and everybody knows what happened there. And then Jonathan Smith, I was very optimistic on that. I thought he checked all the boxes. His success at Oregon State, I thought it was great timing for Michigan State, and that the Pac-12 had dissolved. So I thought in Jonathan Smith, Michigan State had access to, I thought, a better national resume type of candidate than Michigan State might be have access to otherwise. So all that was good, but as we've learned in the last 2 years, the fit wasn't that good in a lot of ways. Jonathan Smith, like I said earlier, great guy. I think he could be a good coach somewhere else. He was excellent at Oregon State. Overall, I've talked about the sideline demeanor, and he even touched on it last night after the Maryland game, saying, not the most demonstrative guy or most emotional guy on the sideline, but a guy that's got a tough team. That's what he said about himself. It's the first time that I'd heard him really acknowledge that some people don't like his stoic sideline demeanor. But not only was it, I've heard people say that, insiders say that Smith is big about he did not want there to be chaos on the sideline. So he wanted to exude a certain image of control, which is okay, but the fans read it rightly or wrongly. It bothered the fans. And in my opinion, it cost him a year of patience from the fans. You can call it stoic, you can call it even keel, you can also call it casual. And I will say that there was casualness there, maybe a little bit, but there was also a casual element in a lot of other aspects of the program. And at Michigan State, every screw's got to be tight, all the cylinders got to be hitting. You can't have anything casual at all. And there was just enough casual here and there, and then some late game mistakes, and you go 4-8 and 5-7, and you lose the fan base. And that's what happened. So Matt Dorsicles the Wise, we're going to bring him in for a minute, but let me check the Super Chats. We got the tip jar open, Matt, and we have some very, very generous Spartan fans tonight, excited about what's going on. And I field these questions as we go. And it looks like Blongjohn's checking in also with a big one. Blongjohn, look out, Blongjohn with a tip jar, $99. Thank you very much, Blongjohn, from out there on the West Coast in California, I believe. Really appreciate it. Very generous. Too generous. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. It helps the small business here. He says, appreciate the professionalism and integrity that you continue to show and bring to this space. That's what Blongjohn says. Thanks a lot, Blongjohn. Really appreciate that. Let's see. We've got Tanker Jag 2278. $50. Thanks a lot. We appreciate that also. A lot of happy fans out there. This is from Tanker Jag 2278. He says, go green from Washington State. Happy, Fitz on board. Great work with keeping Spartans engaged and informed. Comp, thanks a lot. And thank you. Let's see what we've got. We've got Hank Graper also. Hank Graper says, that's $50 from Hank Graper. And he says, Comp, thanks for all you do. Thank you for all of your help. And also, TOP GDS 1492. I think he already tip jarred earlier. He's coming back with $10. And he says, Pat Fitzgerald on the podcast discussed that he had been preparing for a job for a while. Heard anything on any work he's already done? ? Your best guess on offensive coordinator ? Good question. I've got some questions out to some people with inside information about offensive coordinator. I've not heard anything yet. about that job. What's he been doing preparing for, let's see, it says Fitzgerald on the podcast, talking about his podcast on ESPN, which was very impressive. He says he discussed that he's been preparing for the job for a while. Heard anything on work he's already done. On work he's already done, it was told to me by someone with access that Pat has like 25, 30 guys in mind, potential staff members that he's been, kind of focusing on and I don't want to say daydreaming about, but calculating what he would want to put together when he got a head coaching job. So that plan that he's envisioned for himself is about to go. It's already in motion. He's already making phone calls and so forth. But yes, he's been visualizing this for a long time. And you saw the podcast. He's ready. He's ramped up. He's super motivated. He knows the neighborhood. He knows the Big Ten. He knows Michigan State. He knows the track. And he's very confident on what he can do. Super chat also from D Gotti. D Gotti, $5 from D Gotti. Thank you. He says, "Go Green. Excited for the new brand of Spartan football." And Jeff Taylor, 4140, $50 from Jeff Taylor, 40, and with no question. We opened the super chat for questions, but none of those guys offered questions. But man, we appreciate the support from everybody out there and the SpartanMag subscribers. We need more subscribers. These people love SpartanMag. Been doing it since the beginning of the internet. They love our writing and our analysis and everything, including people like Dorsey the Wise, Matt Dorsey, been doing it for a long time. Hey, what do you think about this in comparison? You were around for the Bobby Williams era, covered recruiting for us through several coaches. Your thoughts about the level of optimism for this hire compared to others, and then I'd be interested in your thoughts about this because you posted on the Underground Bunker about 36 hours ago that you were like, man, Michigan State is kind of screwing up the operation here. Do you still feel that way? And those other questions. Matt Dorsey, go.
Well, that's a great point, Jim. And, the reason I said quote unquote screwing up is that, I just, from the standpoint, it sounds to me like Michigan State was obviously trying to get all their ducks in a row with this situation. In a perfect world, obviously beating Maryland didn't make a difference for Coach Jonathan Smith. So if beating Maryland didn't make a difference, I just question, could this have been done a little bit earlier to sort of allow, a little bit of a ramp up to try to make sure that, you're getting kids before they jump into the portal, and as far as sort of placating recruits that might be wondering about what's going on and things like that. That was what, the only thing that I sort of, was referencing. And it might have been a situation that, Fitzgerald wanted to make sure that Michigan State had their ducks in a row before he was willing to make the decision, and so and Michigan State had to get their ducks in a row, and it hadn't been, so it could have been that situation. But, as far as optimism, you're looking back on certain coaches, when Mark D'Antonio was hired, and looking at him and the incredible success he had at Michigan State, we were, it's like, okay, we're getting up Mark D'Antonio, but he hadn't had a lot of success at Cincinnati. If you remember, I think you and I were like, glued to the TV watching Cincinnati play Connecticut, I believe, hoping that they were going to beat, Connecticut, because otherwise it was going to make, people, very skeptical about the D'Antonio hire.
He would not have gotten hired if they lost. If they lost to UConn,
right, he might not have gotten.
There's a lot of recency bias in this business of hiring coaches. There's a lot of recency bias. And if they would have lost to UConn, they would have gone 5-6, not made a bowl game, I think. And interestingly, I mentioned it before, Cincinnati was trailing UConn by 3 or 4, for 4 points with a minute 55 to go at UConn's 45-yard line. And it was 4th and 6. And D'Antonio punted. Down by 4 at the 46-yard line, punted, stopped the run, timeout, stopped the run, timeout, stopping the run, timeout, punt, got the ball back, went down, scored, and won. How history could have changed if that strategy hadn't worked out, but it did. And you saw him do that against Iowa a couple of years into his tenure at Michigan State. But anyway, that UConn game was big, and these things change on a dime. They beat UConn, he was hired, and the rest of your thought, please, Matt.
Yeah, and So from a standpoint, of getting excited, it's I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I was very, excited about the Jonathan Smith hire. Like you, I thought he checked a lot of boxes, and I still think he's a good football coach. And it's one of those situations where, I don't think from a personality standpoint he sort of helped himself. You were talking about him being stoic, and hey, stoic works when you're Tom Landry and you're Bear Bryant, but when you're not winning games, stoic doesn't necessarily always play out well. And that sort of is one of the things that fans see and fans pick up on. They want to see sort of fire in the belly, so to speak. And when you're being stoic and, because you're trying to show composure and control and things like that, that's fine and dandy. But I mean, hey, even Nick Saban would, get fiery and yell at guys and things like that, So, I mean, there's something to be said for, I understand where that stoicism, might come from and why you might be trying to portray it. But, there are times when, fans and even players to that matter want to see somebody sort of, get excited and get fired up and show emotion. So I think it's sort of a double-edged sword. But I was very excited for that hire. But I look at Pat Fitzgerald, and I know people have referenced that podcast. I think it's a great situation for him being away from football, because he's talked about, just the idea of being able to research and figure out the whole NIL and how that morphed into the revenue sharing and his whole plan. Sometimes the best thing that happens is stepping away and being able to analyze things and look at things and get and of course go around places and see how other people are doing things. And so I think from that standpoint, plus just the fact that the guy is itching to coach, I think there's a lot of things to get excited about, from the standpoint of, his situation coming to Michigan State. I mean, in addition to the fact that, he won at Northwestern, which you had a great article where you talked about, nobody had really won at that place since, Ara Parseghian pretty much. And I did the research. I looked up Randy Walker and Gary Barnett. They had losing records at Northwestern, I mean, for as great as those guys, great a job as they did at Northwestern, they still couldn't even have a winning record when their careers ended there. So the fact that Pat Fitzgerald did, I think, is a testament to just how good of a coach he was, at Northwestern. And here's a guy who I think will, speaking with some people who, that really, live and breathe, Michigan State football. One of the things that they were disappointed with is they just didn't feel like there was an identity, with the program the past 2 years. And, Fitzgerald's going to have an identity. The Spartans are going to have an identity under Pat Fitzgerald. And I think that's something that, Michigan State fans and I think Michigan State players, really want Michigan, because Michigan State's always had an identity, even when they weren't very good,
Yeah.
They had an identity.
I think he's going to be all about toughness. He's a toughness guy. Those Northwestern teams, when they were right, they were tough, they were correct. And, one of the theories is going to be that he's going to recruit some of his type of guys, Northwestern type of guys, but also maybe more guys with a little more horsepower. I'm sure he's excited about that. Everybody knows about the recruiting, recruiting obstacles you have at Northwestern academically. He's fired up. And when this happened, when this started 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I mentioned a little bit about this in some of the articles I wrote today and something I just posted a minute ago. I don't know if I can go into many specifics, but there was a Michigan State, an influential booster who had gotten in touch with him, and they just kind of asked about level of interest or whatever. It was kind of floated to him, and not in an official Michigan State capacity, but someone who had access to Michigan State officials, and asked Pat Fitzgerald, would you be interested in talking potentially about the Michigan State coaching job? And Fitzgerald's response was an R-rated yes, with another word in there, with an exclamation point.
Right.
I mean, like, let's go now. Yes, bring it now. Where's my whistle? Where's my cleats? Let's go. And that's a while ago. No disrespect to Jonathan Smith. Fitzgerald, of course, did not want his name out there in official capacity out of respect to a sitting head coach, obviously. But, I mean, you talk about a guy that's running to Michigan State, like ready to do it. Bielema was all kinds of motivated when he got a second chance at the Big Ten at Illinois, when other schools were turning him down, including Michigan State. Fitzgerald at some point had to wonder if he'd ever coach again. And then in recent weeks when he got a settlement with Northwestern, it could not prove that he knew what was going on, or however it was worded. Anyway, he won that settlement and that was cleared. And what the thing that was in Fitzgerald's favor through all of this was the demeanor he had, the example he had set as head coach for all those years at Northwestern. Everybody could see, win or lose, what type of person he was. Sometimes you don't know a guy really, and maybe we really don't know him, but it sure seemed like just an upstanding model type of college football coach, type of guy that Izzo loves, D'Antonio loves, all those guys. Although D'Antonio, they battled a few times, but Michigan State fans, they know what he was. So the fact that he'd be involved in a scandal like that, I don't want to demean some of the things that might have happened or whatever, but if anyone could come through that, win a settlement and say, dude, that's not me, and get a second chance, it would be him. And for him to get that chance here at Michigan State, which we're inching closer to, and right now, I just posted this over at the message board, SpartanMag.com underground bunker. Let's see. I just messed. I'll get back to that in a moment. But
well, I'll give you.
Go ahead. I was gonna post something, but I lost it. I clicked something and I lost it. Go ahead.
My dad called me up tonight. Now, my dad, wanted to talk about the hire, and he said something. He goes, "Do you remember saying?" And this is when my son was like 5 years old. I mean, this was a long time ago, or maybe, who knows? He might have been younger than that. And like I said, my son, was never a football player. He was a soccer player. But, he said, "You said one time that if your son could play football for any coach in the Big Ten, it would be Pat Fitzgerald." And I said, "I don't remember saying that." But, that's the level of respect.
Yes.
That, now I think my dad, said, well, this was before D'Antonio came to Michigan State, obviously, but that's the level of respect that this guy commanded, at one time where, this guy, epitomized, just, doing things the right way and recruiting kids that, were tremendous student athletes. If you watch that podcast, the kids that graduate, the kids that, do things the right way. This guy, there's a reason why he had the success he did. And there's a reason why he had opportunities when he was at Northwestern to go to schools that, and professional jobs that, most people would dream about. I think this is, for the situation that Michigan State's in, and I don't think you could ask for a guy to come in any better situation as somebody who's motivated, who understands the Big Ten, understands the landscape, has a really good grasp of how, you watch that interview and you see how, he has a really good plan as far as NIL and revenue sharing and how money needs to be spent and recruiting and the portal and things like that. This is a guy who basically has been, thinking about this for 2 years, about, hey, when I get back, this is how I'm going to do things. I posted something where I said that I think Jonathan Smith is going to get another head coaching job someday, and he's going to look back and his time at Michigan State and what he's learned at Michigan State is going to serve him better than probably all the years he was at Oregon State. Sometimes, when you fail at something, it's way more valuable than being successful or having something taken away from you. In that Pat Fitzgerald's case, it really allows you to sit there and reflect and look at things from a way that you never would have had the opportunity to do so if you didn't have to face that adversity. Hey, Mark D'Antonio was the guy that, always talked about dealing with adversity and that's the difference. And I think Pat Fitzgerald has dealt with that adversity, and it's allowed him to probably become a better football coach moving forward than he ever would have been if he was still at if he was still at Northwestern right now and Michigan State was able to poach him away, he probably wouldn't be as good as coach as he's going to be. The fact that he's been out of work for 2 years, last 2 years, because of the situation he dealt with.
I think that's a good point. If they'd hired him after one of his 8-4 seasons, I think you're right. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way. His last 2 years at Northwestern went 1-11 in his last season. Some things happened there. Hankwitz, the longtime great defense coordinator, retired, and also Fitzgerald changed offensive coordinators. Maybe that didn't go well at that time, and it coincided with the transfer portal. Initially, Northwestern not very strong at all in transfer portal for a lot of reasons. Academics is one of them. The academic hurdles, it's going to be hard for them to bring in transfers. I think his first 2 years, they brought in like 4 or 5 transfers in each of those 2 years. Meanwhile, the first game of 2021, I think they might have went 1-11 that year. That was when Kenneth Walker had his coming out party at Ryan Field there at Northwestern. Kenneth Walker scoring on the first play of the game. You look at that transfer and 20 transfers on Michigan State's team that year, and Northwestern might have brought in 4 that year. So they did not make a real good transition to the transfer era. That, among other things, led to the last 2 seasons. But what he did earlier, he hasn't forgotten how to coach. It's not like he's 75 years old coming to the end. He's refreshed now, and it's going to be a really interesting case study to see how he does in this situation when you have an established coach like Fitzgerald, who is and was Mr. Northwestern, getting a second chance at a big rig like Michigan State. It's going to be interesting to watch. Today, when things were going down, I went over to the football building, and Matt, it reminded me of that day that Bobby Williams was fired back in 2002, I guess, November or so. I just remember that we were there for afternoon interviews, and I had you on the phone. Back then, Michigan State had practice in the afternoon, so interviews were like 4 or 5, 6 o'clock at night. We were over there, and it was dark. It was dark. Night had fallen, and one of the Michigan State sports information people said, "Okay, let's get out of the hallway here. We're going to go into the auditorium, and we'll have questions in there." So everybody was herded in there, and I'm always like, if people are herding me in here, I'm going to go the other way. They're herding us in here. I'm like, what's going on here? We didn't know that Williams had been fired. And herding everybody in one area, and I kind of went out the other door, just kind of went around the building. And back then there was no Twitter, and there was very little instant access to the internet. But we had the SpartanMag Underground Bunker message board at SpartanMag.com, and I'm looking, and I called Matt. I'm like, Matt, post this on the bunker. And Matt was posting a play-by-play of what I was relaying to him. Do you remember that, Matt? Do you remember what I relayed to you that night? Some subscribers might remember.
Yeah, I remember that night. It was an interesting night, that's for sure.
Because nobody knew that he was fired at that moment, correct?
Right.
And so what do you remember me telling you on the phone? The first iterations of cell phones. It wasn't a smartphone back then. And I'm like, Matt, get on the message board, Underground Bunker message board, and type in what I'm seeing here outside the football building. Do you remember what that was?
I can't remember verbatim, but I do remember, you were, and I remember also something. There were, if memory serves me correctly, like there was something you saw or in the parking lot as well that kind of like,
Yes.
That if my memory serves me correctly,
a different version of myself would have handled it differently. But I they're telling us to go in here for interviews, and I'm outside the football building. I'm like, I'm gonna go around the corner, look in the front, and I look in the front of the building, and I see Bobby Williams coming out, and I kind of ducked under the bushes. I was a younger reporter. I should have went up and asked him for a comment. That's what a real reporter does, but I was such a wuss. Then Charles Rogers was coming into the building, and I saw Charles Rogers like hug him and give him a demonstrative, I couldn't hear what he was saying, but it was along the lines of, man, this is wrong what they did, whatever. That shouldn't have happened. And Bobby hugged him and nodded. And then I gathered that was it. Bobby Williams, had been fired, and I'm not sure it had been. I'm not sure it had been announced officially at that point, but what I was telling you, I think in the Underground Bunker that moment is, I was like, Matt, this has all the look of being Bobby Williams' final days leaving the football building, and then he got in his car and he drove off, and people asked me, Did he squeal his tires when he left? I'm like, no, he didn't squeal his tires. But I saw Bobby Williams and Charles Rogers exchange there. And by the time, I do remember now, I did have the impulse to chase him down, but he was going in the other direction. I didn't really want to run after him. Probably should have. He might not have talked anyway, and I would have looked like a dipped dork. Sometimes you have to do that. Go ahead.
It's interesting how sometimes, I'll tell Spartan fans that sometimes you pick up on things because, I'm not sure if it was that coaching change or the John L. Smith one. I remember we were talking on the phone and you were the story about when Minnesota just throttled Michigan State. And I want to say Glenn Mason was kind of looking, and he was looking at you because he didn't know if you were somebody he thought that somebody from Michigan State was going to come and maybe say something to him because Glenn Mason wanted the job at Michigan State
earlier, and he had interviewed. He had interviewed a few years earlier.
Yeah, he had just destroyed Michigan State 45-14 or something, and here he is. Before he's getting ready to leave Spartan Stadium, he's kind of looking around. Well, is anybody going to come up and say something to me?
Yes.
And say, hey, we'll be in touch or something like that.
Yes.
Or, hey, And I remember you saying, Mason was kind of hanging around, just the water cooler, waiting for somebody from Michigan, and it never happened.
Never happened.
So, I remember that story.
Back in those days, I wore a tie to the game, and I had this overcoat that I wore, so I kind of looked more important than I actually was. And yes, Mason had interviewed with Michigan State a few years earlier. That might have been the year. I don't know which job search that was. That might have been when they ended up hiring Bobby Williams. McPherson went out, and Greg Ianni mentioned on a radio show here locally just a few weeks ago that he interviewed Glenn Mason. Glenn Mason had a nice run of success at Minnesota, and I think he would have done well at Michigan State. Interviewed, did not get the job. So here, Bobby Williams is getting fired. Williams destroyed him, and back then they did interviews in trailers outside the tunnel. The tunnel that feeds into Spartan Stadium. Through that tunnel, there's a trailer on either side. The Minnesota trailer's over here, Michigan State's over here, and the press conference is going on. And again, I leave the press conference to see if I'm looking to see if anyone's going to talk to Glenn Mason. I'm looking to see if someone's going to give him a bump. So I'm watching Mason. Mason sees me, looks me in the eye once or twice, kind of nods. And then I'm hanging around. Then he looks at me again, then 3 or 4 times, and that's all. I think he was looking for a bump. I was looking to see if anyone was going to bump him. No one ever did, and I don't think he ever became a prime candidate for the job that time. And back that was Ron Mason was athletic director, and Ron Mason really did not conduct a search at all for 5 weeks, and at the very end was painted in a corner, and his sports information director John Lewandowski knew John L. Smith from Louisville, and Mason's like, all right, let's hire him. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I love Ron. Rest in peace. I'm sorry, John. Couldn't, but yeah, Glenn Mason would have been a good hire right then, as it turned out. And I like John L. Smith. He had a good run here and there. But Mason at that point, he was never able to recruit a defense at Minnesota, but he always had that zone run game churning out real well. And eventually they fired him because he blew too big of a lead in a bowl game again. So you can't be blowing leads in bowl games.
Yeah, I will say this. I know some people, you think about, I go back and I think about Northwestern teams, and one thing that you look back at Northwestern under Pat Fitzgerald is, they had some quarterbacks there that I hated seeing Michigan State have to go up against these guys.
Yeah.
And they didn't necessarily become great pros, but they were darn good college quarterbacks.
Yes.
And of course they ran a little bit of a funky system. And I think, and I mentioned that, hey, Northwestern had to do that. But man, whether it was, Kafka, I believe, or Clayton Thorson, and the guy who I thought was the best of them all, but he just couldn't stay healthy, was Dan Persa. That guy was just, an incredible athlete and an incredible quarterback, in my opinion, if he ever could have stayed healthy. But what Northwestern was able to do, at the quarterback position, I think has to be somewhat of an exciting idea for, prospective quarterbacks at Michigan State moving forward. because they certainly never had, the Mark Dells and the B.J. Cunninghams and the Charles Rogers to throw to. They're throwing to Flynn Nagel and I forget I remember one year they had this H-back who was just causing, Michigan State headaches. This guy was just making plays all over the place, this H-back that they had. But that's what you had to do at Northwestern. But, before I started working for you, we took some kids out from my school, me and the assistant football coach, and we hit 5 schools with these 4 kids. And we hit Northwestern, Michigan, Michigan State, Notre Dame, and Wisconsin. And the kids to a T, now Randy Walker was at Northwestern there. When we got back, they all said that Northwestern was their favorite place. They loved Northwestern, which I was kind of surprised with, considering, all the schools that they were looking at. They just said they enjoyed the Northwestern visit the most. And maybe it was to do with Coach Walker. Maybe that had something to do with it, RIP for him. But with that being said, knowing those kids the way I do, 2 of those 4 kids, Northwestern could have never recruited, and all 4 kids ended up going D1, BCS level schools. But 2 of the kids Northwestern could never touch.
Because academics?
Because academics. Now, I'm not saying they weren't good kids. They went to schools and they were full qualifiers and stuff like that. But Northwestern, wasn't able to recruit. Northwestern couldn't take in, a Charles Rogers. Northwestern couldn't have taken, some of the other guys that Michigan State's had over, some of the great players Michigan State's had over the years. They just couldn't recruit. And I'm sure that Pat Fitzgerald has to be very excited about, being able to recruit, pretty much anybody he wants to at a Michigan State. Plus just the idea, you're talking about a guy who is a Chicago guy. I mean, how many times have we talked about, Michigan State getting quality players from the Chicago and Illinois area?
Right.
I mean, that hasn't happened as of recently. And, you just look back a couple of years ago, Michigan State had the Panashuk brothers on the defensive line, and Naquan Jones and Raekwon Williams, or the Allen brothers, or,
all linemen. Everyone you just mentioned there are linemen. The Chicagoland area produces linemen.
Yeah. And, and here, so it's one of those things where, I just think that, and I saw Pat Fitzgerald talk about his roster had kids from 26 different states, because Northwestern did have to recruit nationally because there's not enough kids in the Midwest that are going to check all the boxes, to get into Northwestern. But the fact of the matter is that, his familiarity and his name brand in the Midwest and in Chicago, I just think is something that's, and I mentioned this on the message board a couple weeks ago. I said, and I was just talking about one of the reasons why I thought you kind of had to make a change at this point in time, because, I just thought it was going to be very difficult for Coach Smith moving forward to be able to recruit kids, considering the perception of the program, the fact that he's going to be on the hot seat. Every kid that he would have tried to walk into, every other coach would have been saying, hey, he's not going to be there. He's probably going to get fired this fall anyway. It would have been very difficult. Now you put that same kid, him and his parents sitting in a meeting with Pat Fitzgerald, and there's nobody out there who doesn't know who Pat Fitzgerald is. Mm-hmm. He's a guy who commands respect, and and he when he's a very competent individual, and you hear him speak, he's somebody that people definitely people listen to him, and when he opens his mouth and starts talking, you're like, man, this guy knows his stuff, and he's very confident. And I think that's something that will resonate with, not only recruits, but also fans as well. Fans love to, see somebody who's, when he talks about it. I'm sure when he has his press conference, he's going to talk about he came to Michigan State to win championships. He saw what Mark D'Antonio has done here. He knows it can be done here, and he's going to talk about, the tradition of Michigan State and the respect he has for Michigan State. And those are the type of things that, that resonate with Spartan fans, when today that's so important, because you need the support of the alumni and the fans, because, in this era we live in with the transfer portal and NIL and revenue sharing, you need people on board. And I think, Pat Fitzgerald's a guy that, people will find be proud that he's representing their university.
All right, I appreciate that, Matt. Before I let you go, thanks for that insight. A lot of things I hadn't really considered those angles. In the meantime, people that are watching, there's big numbers watching right now that have not been part of our website in the past or not checked out. Go to SpartanMag.com. Also, give us a like here on this channel. Subscribe to this channel. That really helps us out with the algorithms. That helps. It helps inform other Michigan State fans out there that our content exists, and it gives them a push notification when our content's out there. Go to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber. Half off right now. It's like $53 for the year, $5 for a month. $2.50 for a couple of weeks. $1.75 a week. Less than a couple of cups of coffee for the month. $53, 50% off. Cyber Monday deal going on right now. Become a subscriber, and with it, you get access to The Athletic for a year. That's a great deal, best deal ever. Half off, $53, SpartanMag.com. Check it out. People like Dorsicles the Wise, Matt Dorsey posts over there, and a cast of thousands. Paul Konendijk, Kenny Jordan, Jake Laskawa, the great Jason Killip, and others posting over there, and our stories and our analysis on the Underground Bunker message board. Constant Michigan State talk. Go over there, become a Magger. You will love it. I wanted to mention that I guess we'll let you go, Matt. I really appreciate your insight, and I look forward to more posts from you over at the Underground Bunker message board, and also talking with you offline about as this goes forward. I know what I was going to ask you. I've not been on the message board most of the day. I've been working and writing and trying to chase things down on the phone and so forth. I think you've been on the Underground Bunker message board most of the day today, correct? Or you've observed it a little bit today?
Yeah, I mean, I was traveling a little bit today, but I was able to get on the board a little bit.
How have the Michigan State fans on there reacted to the Fitzgerald, to the firing?
It's funny because I think that I just read something where somebody was talking about that if you go over on one of the other boards, they're like in a meltdown mode, over the hiring of Fitzgerald. So,
I don't see that, yeah.
but I think I don't see that on SpartanMag.com. And I think SpartanMag.com has always been, and I think it's a testament to you personally, has always been a very, for lack of a better word, very pragmatic as far as looking at things and realistic. You don't have a sort of a vocal minority that kind of like, rules the message board as much as you do in other places. So I think, most very astute Spartan fans, which I think, we have a lot on SpartanMag.com, understand that this is is a very good hire for the university. And, they're looking at the big picture. There's people out there that I don't know what they think, like, would they want Urban Meyer to come out of retirement or something,
Exactly.
I've
said all along during this process, and I've been warning people, you can say you want to fire Jonathan Smith, but understand there's not going to be any candidates out there that check every single box. Lane Kiffin checks every single box. Other than that, and I'm talking about every single box, have you coached and won at a Power 4 level on a consistent basis? There's just very few in that part alone right there. Recruiting, fit, geographic recruiting, all these things. So, first of all, there was never going to be anyone that checked every single box. And the only box that Pat Fitzgerald doesn't check is the blip of losses in his last 2 seasons. Now, if someone is critical of Pat Fitzgerald, I'm like, okay, I'll understand that. So who would you have rather hired? And usually I get a blank stare because people want a young, great coach that's just going to be a good coach and just wins. I'm like, yeah, I haven't thought of that. That sounds great. Now, who are you talking about? Now, some of the people that have been hired, like Golish and Sumrall, these are good young mid-major coaches that have had 1 or 2 years at the mid-major level. They've never been a head coach at the Power 4 level. And if you're a head coach at the Power 4 level for any length of time, you will start accumulating losses, unless you're Ryan Day and Brent or Kirby Smart. That's it. Those are the only 2 coaches in the country right now that have been at a Power 5, Power 4 program for an extended length of time that have not accumulated losses in terms of like had a 500 season. Josh Heupel is kind of in that category, but he went 8-4 this year. That's not going well in Tennessee, getting blown out by Vanderbilt yesterday. You coach anywhere long enough, and I've mentioned this and written this a number of times, and Michigan State Spartan Mag subscribers might be getting tired of me making this point, but it's an important point to make. Even Hall of Fame coaches like Mark D'Antonio, Barry Alvarez, Kirk Ferentz, They had ups and downs. Those guys had 6-6 seasons here and there. Nobody avoids those if you coach at a place for a certain length of time, especially at Northwestern. And yeah, Fitzgerald had some of those, but that's the way it is unless you're coaching at Georgia or Ohio State. Everybody else has dips. A dip at USC might not be as low as a dip at Michigan State, but coaches still have dips. And Underground Bunker Message Board, thanks for being a part of it, Matt. And before I cut you off, did you have one more point before you left?
I also want to point out that, you mentioned, Lane Kiffin on there. People, I mean, like I said, I was having a conversation with my dad, and he was asking about the Lane Kiffin situation. And I just said, I think Kiffin really showed his colors here because, I don't know what the guy's looking for. As far as leaving, Ole Miss. I mean, he had the team, in the playoffs. They could win the national championship this year, but he's leaving to another school that I guess he feels has a better chance of winning the national championship. I don't know, but I do know this much that, Lane Kiffin, if he wins a national championship at LSU, he's not staying at LSU. He's going to the NFL, I mean, because he failed in the NFL, and Lane Kiffin, if we know anything, he's the most narcissistic person there probably in college football. I mean, Lane Kiffin cares more about Lane Kiffin than anything. And, if he wins at LSU, he's going to sit there and take the job. He's going to be the next coach of the New Orleans Saints or I don't know who, but that's the way he is. So, on the flip side, if Pat Fitzgerald has success at Michigan State, he could be the next Michigan State coach the way D'Antonio was the next 13 years, or something like that, and and then you're turning the program over to a trusted assistant or something like that, so like I said, nobody is going to check all the boxes, but I do think that like you said, Pat Fitzgerald checks a lot of boxes, and these people that talk about, then you get these people, Jim, well, we need to hire somebody who's going to bring players with them. You get that, and that's the Signetti effect.
I've said that a few times. But it can help, but yeah, go ahead.
Right, but here's the thing. Wasn't Jonathan Smith from another school?
Yeah.
And wasn't he able to bring players along with him? How'd that work out for Michigan State? Yeah, the idea that
2 or 3.
I mean, he bought Belling, he bought Tanner Miller, he brought Aiden Childs, and the reality is, it hasn't worked out. So just the idea that, I mean, like I said, Signetti is that outlier that I think that people just think, well, we need to go to some school that we can sit there and, hire the guy and we can just bring his, 15 guys with him. And it's like, well, it's just, that doesn't work, that's an outlier, that example. So,
right.
I think the most important thing is getting somebody who understands. And the one thing you can see about that podcast, and I know you got to go, but Pat Fitzgerald wasn't going to come to a school that wasn't essentially willing to do the things that he thinks needs to be done to win championships, which I'm sure includes, making sure that the infrastructure things that he believes need to be done get done, as well as the monetary things are going to be available to him to get the players that he wants to get. So
look what he did. Look what he did at Northwestern. He helped raise money. He's instrumental in that, and the vision he had for that football building and the refurbishment of the remodeling of the football stadium there. He will have a vision of what needs to be done at Michigan State, and there's a lot of things that need to be done inside that Izzo football building. It looks great on the outside, but it's not plugged in with everything that is needed there, and he will pound the table and do what's needed to get everything state of the art. You're right. He's going to be right out front, and Bat is big on fundraising. Izzo, those guys together, they're going to hit the circuit pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, I loved we're listening to the podcast and where Pat Fitzgerald was saying, hey, I'd love to go to a school where they have a great basketball coach, and I thought about, well, man, you couldn't go to a better place,
Dude,
if you want to go to a school that has.
He was talking about Michigan State. This thing was rolling back then. I'm telling you, it was.
Right.
And that's who he was talking about.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely, it's one of those things where I think that, I'm excited about the possibilities for Michigan State. Now, I'm not thinking that they're going to go out and go 9-3 next year. I know it's going to be a rebuild, but I think it's the process. I think that that what he's going to put in place is a process that can get Michigan State back to the level that, we want and Spartan fans deserve, where, they can be proud of the program and the product that's on the field every weekend.
All right. Matt, I appreciate your time. You have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Hey, Jim, thanks as always. You're the best, buddy.
You are. Thank you, man.
Take care.
We'll see you later. There goes Dorsey the Wise, the great Matt Dorsey, joining us today on SpartanMag Live. And let me get to some of these questions. Also, we've got another question in the super chat here. We've got Justin Godley, super chat of $20. We really appreciate that, and all the other people that have contributed to the super chat tip jar with questions. Thank you to you guys, your support. Justin asks, what is the connection between Fitzgerald and Phil Parker? ? Phil Parker, the former Spartan, great defensive coordinator at Iowa. He says, and what is more likely in your opinion, Phil Parker or Max Bulla as defensive coordinator? Great question. And this is something we've talked about with my peers and Paul Konendijk and some others. That very question about this. I had heard that Jonathan Smith went after Phil Parker. I never confirmed that with anyone super in the know. I heard that from somebody, and I think it's probably true. I can't report it as fact, but I heard it from somebody who knows things, that Jonathan Smith went after Phil Parker initially. Phil Parker, former Spartan, great defensive coordinator at Iowa. And I heard Phil kind of considered it. So when is Kirk Ferentz going to retire? Does that factor into it? So if, the guy that told me this said, yeah, Phil almost came to Michigan State. So would Fitzgerald go back after that again? Now, would Phil Parker reach out? I don't know. Phil Parker's got great loyalty to Kirk Ferentz. We can all see that. Kirk Ferentz is not going to coach forever. Phil Parker's 62 or 63. He's not going to coach forever. He's a Spartan. He loves Michigan State. I've heard from this person that Phil would love to come back to Michigan State. And I don't think this guy is just kind of. I don't think this person is. There's no hyperbole there. He'll tell stories here and there, but I didn't hear it directly from him. This is like a tertiary source, so I'm not saying it as fact, but I do believe what this guy's saying. I believe it, but I can't pass it along as fact, is what I'm saying. Parker loves Michigan State, would like to come back to Michigan State, but he loves Iowa too, and he loves Ferentz. Pat Fitzgerald has a son who plays for Iowa. He goes to Iowa games. He was at the Iowa-Michigan State game a couple weeks ago. So Fitzgerald is tight with coaches at Iowa. That line of communication would be wide open. And I suspect that would probably cross Fitzgerald's mind. I'm going to Michigan State. Parker's a Michigan State guy. I got to ask him. I suspect that can happen. With Max Bulla, heard from a really great source tonight. Max and Pat Fitzgerald, good relationship. And there's something could happen there. I mean, Pat's going to have his choice on a lot of people. Max is a great up-and-coming young position coach, linebackers coach at Notre Dame, soon to be a coordinator somewhere. Why not Michigan State? Can you imagine Fitzgerald and Bulla recruiting to the Michigan State defense? You're asking me what is the connection and what is more likely. What's more likely? I'm going to say Max is a little more likely just because I know a little bit about something that's going on there, but who knows? The Phil thing, it would not surprise me if that thing's already in motion. Would not surprise me if Joe Rossi stays on as linebackers coach. I've heard that one through the grapevine a little bit. Fitzgerald likes Joe Rossi. He's coached against him in the Big Ten. He likes Wozniak, Michigan State's tight ends coach, Brian Wozniak. You're asking me how I know these things? When you've done this for 35 years, you get sources. All right. As far as the Fitzgerald situation, I spoke with someone, a source who has had direct communication with Fitzgerald. And I posted this on the Underground Bunker message board at SpartanMag.com a short time ago. This is from a source with direct communication with Fitzgerald. And he tells me, quote, everything is looking good. Final pieces of the contract being finalized. All sides are happily respecting the process, unquote. So, not all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So at this moment, not a done deal. I'm anticipating it becoming a done deal Monday late morning. I would expect. I'm expecting Fitzgerald probably. I'll bet he's on his way to Lansing right now. I'll bet he's going to be on campus on Monday because he's got to get with this roster because this roster's leaving for winter break Friday. And a lot of these players, portal season, a lot of these guys are going to leave and they're going to have no designs on coming back. So Fitzgerald's going to want to come in, get his arms around those guys, talk to them, share a vision with them. He's going to know something about these players. He's watched them play live, so he'll be able to talk about players individually and probably touch. He's going to be good in that room when he gets that chance. And I suspect he might have that chance to talk to them on Monday. He's going to want to get there as soon as he can. Then you have signing day on Wednesday. He's got to talk to recruits when he's hired. So this thing needs to be pushed along. I expect him to be on campus Monday. I expect the hiring to be official Monday. That's what I'm thinking. I'm expecting him to be at the basketball game on Tuesday talking to the crowd when Michigan State plays Iowa. And he'll be talking to these players. Today over at the football building, I spoke with Christian Phillips, Luka Vincic, a couple of offensive linemen, and freshman running back Zion Gist. I also spoke to briefly, Connor Moore, Dellinger, Stanton Ramil, but they didn't really want to talk, which I respected. But they were in good spirits. I was talking to Big Dooley Christian Phillips about Pat Fitzgerald. And he said, yeah, I heard something about that. And he looked at me, he's like, what do you know about him? He was interested in what I said. So, I mean, he wants, I can just tell in his eyes that he wants to believe in the next Michigan State coach. He's had a couple injuries, so I don't know what he would be able to command on the portal market. He's a big Georgia kid who really loves Jim Mahalchik, the offensive line coach. He said that Mahalchik and Zion Gist, the running backs coach, told Zion Gist the same thing that Mahalchik told Dooley, that they're just going to keep coaching there at Michigan State until someone tells them they're no longer needed. So they're going to keep coaching there. I don't know about their chances of staying. Can't keep everybody. I think there's a solid chance Courtney Hawkins stays, solid chance Rossi stays, solid chance Wozniak stays. That's the way I'd handicap it right now. I love Lengy Suea'Noa, Michigan State's defensive line coach. Good, genuine guy, good coach, did a good job at the defensive line. Never had a lot to work with pass rush-wise, and he does not coach the edge position. He's just defensive tackle, down defensive end. And you need to get some pass rush out of those guys too. But I think he's done a good job bringing it along, whether it be people in the portal or Van Sumeren, his development. You look at late season here, Jalen Satchel's done a good job. Last year, I thought Daquan Dowse, good job identifying him in the portal, putting some weight on him, got a good season out of him. Ben Roberts was looking good before he became injured. I think Suea'Noa is a really good position coach and a good recruiter. And he's done a great job with Polynesian kids. Hey, say it like it is. There's some great players in that category, and Michigan State's never really had access to that. Coach Lange opened up that door. Rustin Young, Ben Roberts, Moa, and some others. And there will be more where that comes from if and when Michigan State has success. But Lengy Suea'Noa is going to be in demand, and I think he'll get a chance to do some things anywhere else in the country, maybe on the West Coast. He might prefer that. But good man, whether or not they have room for him, be interesting to see. I think that guy would be a keeper also. But I know, and I've heard that Fitzgerald has a mindset of some people he would want to bring with him to help. So I'm sure he's got some people in mind. And he always had good defensive ends out of nowhere at Northwestern. In terms of holding on to the roster, like I said, if Phillips and Gist are any indication, they like Michigan State and they're eager to see who the next coach is. And they're all doing research on Fitzgerald. That's going to be interesting to see how that all pans out. So, also, let's get to the questions here. We got a couple more super chats I want to mention. Then we'll get to some questions. We'll buzz through them real quick. I've not looked at the questions yet. But usually I look at the questions during rehearsal. No rehearsal today because I've been in such a hurry. We got Tanker Jag again. Tanker Jag 2278. Tanker Jag, thank you. He says $20 in the tip jar. Appreciate that. He says Smith's demeanor changed about a week ago. Seemed relieved, depressured. He knew? ? I'm sure he knew all along. He was trying to fight to keep his job. Had a chance to do that if they'd have beaten Minnesota and or Penn State and Iowa. If he'd gone 5-7, did he keep him? Maybe 6-6. They would have kept him. So he was fighting for his job. I'm not going to say he was in denial. He's just even keel, same guy all the time. Gets up, goes to work, coaches ball. Gets up, goes to work, coaches ball. Gets up, goes to work, coaches ball. Does some recruiting, does some of these things. So he was unchanged the whole time. You're saying you noticed a difference in his demeanor. His sideline demeanor changed. He talked a little bit more on the sidelines with officials, with coaches on the phone, just a little bit. That was more than he used to do. I'm quite sure that it was relayed to him from some people. Hey, the fans don't understand why you don't talk. You got to talk. And I do think, and it wasn't to the point of being fake, but he was trying to address that. He wanted to keep the job. I heard he liked the job, and no coach wants to ever be a failure, and we have that on his record, but that was the case. All right, we got a super chat also from Top JDS 1492. He's been in the tip jar. He's been up to the bar a few times. Appreciate him. He says, this coaching search went fast for fans. How many candidates do you think J-Bat evaluated, and who advised him on the decision? There were others that he looked at. I've not got it factually. I've heard in the Georgia Tech situation when they hired Brent Key that initially J-Bat was very interested in Willie Fritz. If you're athletic director at Michigan State and all of a sudden Brian Kelly comes open and people like Gary Danielson are saying, I don't know if he would be listening to that, but they'd be a great fit for Michigan State. And I've heard that Kelly's people reached out to Michigan State. So if you're J-Bat, Brian Kelly had great success at Notre Dame, had some success at LSU, great success at Cincinnati. He's coaching at the State of Michigan. Yeah, that's interesting. There are indications that he showed some interest there. And there are indications that internally people were like, nah. So to be a long long shelf life politician and being an athletic director is being a politician, to read a room and see which way and meet the people where they are. When a lot of people are like, no, on Brian Kelly, then you're just like, okay, that's what a smart person does. So boosters were involved, and boosters, a lot of them liked Fitzgerald. A lot of other people internally liked him. I don't know if he asked Mark D'Antonio. I suspect he might have. A wise man would. I know D'Antonio was down in Florida for the basketball tournament at Fort Myers. I don't know it for a fact, but I suspect he might have asked D'Antonio. And I'm sure D'Antonio would have been D'Antonio would say Pat Fitzgerald would be a great coach at Michigan State. Kevin Guskowitz, president of Michigan State, has great respect for Mr. Tom Izzo. They get along really well, and he values Izzo's opinion. Izzo, tough spot for Izzo because he backed Jonathan Smith, and but you can only do that to an extent. And I'm sure that Guskowitz asked Izzo about Pat Fitzgerald. I've not talked to Izzo about this, but I'm sure he said Pat Fitzgerald would be a great coach at Michigan State. I don't have that factually, but I can't report that happened. But I know Guskowitz and Izzo are close. I know D'Antonio was down in Florida with all those other guys. What are the chances that came up? I would hope it came up. If you're J-Bat, you have to ask a resident coach who knows the room, who knows the track, knows what it is to coach at Michigan State, and has coached against that guy. You got to ask him what he thinks. I suspect he did. As far as decision makers, then the boosters are involved. And it's my understanding J-Bat. So people are wondering, why did this take so long? Why didn't they just fire Smith 4 weeks ago? Piecing it together, Guskowitz, who also is a fine, honorable man in his own right, they've always been impressed with Jonathan Smith as a person in the short time they've gotten to know him. And it was relayed to me from somebody that some of the phraseology that Guskowitz used was that he, Guskowitz, and they, including Bat, want to do right by Jonathan, unquote, as a man. They want to do right by him. You can take that. I took that to mean, I've been told part of that is they did not want to slap him with the indignity of being fired in the middle of the season. Let him in year number 2 finish coaching his team and these young men for the rest of the year. And you might say, well, that puts Michigan State behind the 8 ball. Not if you've already decided that Fitzgerald's your guy. But you could say, well, you could hire Fitzgerald 3-4 weeks ago and get started. That's true. That would have helped. But they wanted to give Smith, I don't know if Smith, if he'd have gotten to 6-6, I think he would have kept his job. I don't know that for a fact, but they're giving him a chance to work out of it, firstly. Secondly, the Fitzgerald thing really gained more steam in the last 2 weeks. The steam began after the UCLA game. Very small flickers with some initial contact. And then there was nothing for a few weeks. And then it started coming from another direction really hard and fast the last couple of weeks. Could they have hired Fitzgerald earlier and gotten a head start to keep this recruiting class together, get with the players and so forth? Yes, that might have been more efficient. But out of respect to Smith, they did not do it that way. So you're talking about decision makers. It's Bat, but Bat reads a room. Can I say factually that the Kelly thing went very far? I don't know that for a fact. I'm just like pieces that I've heard from sources. It sure indicated that way. I know that there was somebody out there that's a general manager of a Power 4 team who was contacted by Brian Kelly. And Brian Kelly told that general manager, I'm going to get the Michigan State job. I want you to be my general manager, trying to recruit him away from a Power 4 team. Where did Brian Kelly get that idea? I also heard that Michigan State never gave Kelly reason to believe he was going to get the job. That was just Kelly, based on initial contact, probably flew off the handle on that, got over his skis on that one. So, in terms of decision making, once everyone was on board with Fitzgerald, I don't think it went much further than that. I heard Michigan State reached out to a Power 4 coach briefly. I don't know who it was at Michigan State. A coach in the ACC. I don't know how far that went. Then the Fitzgerald thing, as it gained steam, and there was all the support for it, you could communicate with him and get that ball rolling easier than a coach who might be sitting at another job. So it's almost like 2 theaters a few years ago. You had the theater brewing with Fitzgerald, and then you had the theater over here giving Smith a chance to rally at the end of the season and maybe keep his job. That's the way it looks to me. J-Bad didn't tell me this is what happened. That's just kind of the way it looks to me. I'd heard from another booster that if something else was going to be set up, it might be set up with Hartline, Brian Hartline, offensive coordinator at Ohio State. But he told me that a meeting never actually took place with that one. So how far did it go? There were some initials, but I think so many things pointed at Fitzgerald that it looks like that thing just hit the superhighway. Similar to when Jonathan Smith was hired. Just right away that was the guy, and it went in that direction. So interesting times, historic times for Michigan State. That's what I've got to answer. That's my best attempt to answer that question. It's been fascinating. These coaching searches always are. I think we've got another super chat down here somewhere, and I'll bust through some questions really quick before we sign off. In the meantime, become a subscriber. $53 for a whole year. That's 50% off. SpartanMag.com. Become a magger. You will love it. All right, what do we have here? I'm looking for it. I thought there was another. We got a lot of posts here. I'm sorry if I missed one. I really am. I thought there was more than one. There was 42. The demeanor one, there was those two. That'll do it. All right, tip jar is still open. Let me check out the questions. And I've not gone through these questions previously. Usually when I do this show, I go through the questions and I can anticipate and organize my answer. But now I can't find the link. Let me see if I can find it. Darn, this is going to take me a second because I lost it. I had it called up before. Now I've lost it. Okay, here it is. I don't know how many questions are here, but like I said, usually so some of these are putting me on the spot right away. In the meantime, if you got a question over in the comments area with a tip jar with the super chat, we will field those before we sign off. I know we're heading toward midnight right now on Sunday night. Let's see. PP, players play, tough players win, posts. I should have asked these people to say where they're posting from, but I didn't. That's my bad. He says, will Bat address what went wrong with NIL in the early days of the Smith era and why there is reason to believe it's fixed? I doubt that he'll talk much about that because he wasn't here to really experience all of that. Sola Beer Guy, I think he's from Westland, Michigan. He says, at this point on your insider knowledge, is the Fitz hire a completely done deal or is there a chance something could fall through? Not a completely done deal, but I don't think it falls through. The Luke Fickell thing fell through back in 2020. It was a done deal, and then one Board of Trustees member kind of blocked it and delayed it and stopped it and made Michigan State and Beekman jump through some more hoops. And as Michigan State was forced to jump through some more and more hoops, all of a sudden Fickell's like, you know what, this doesn't pass the smell test. I'm out. And people said that his wife was concerned about the culture at Michigan State, and that's what they used as an excuse. But when Beekman went down there to speak an interview with Luke Fickell, the president of the university, Sam Stanley, did not go with him. And in retrospect, a lot of people were like, that's ridiculous. The president, for a hire like that, the president needs to accompany the athletic director for an interview of that stature. So Michigan State just fumbled the ball on that one. I don't see that happening this time, but it's not a done deal yet contractually. Bad Blake says, names to know as possible offensive coordinator. I don't have any for you right now on that. I've asked somebody that has some inside knowledge, and I don't have any names. That's going to be interesting. Not sure. Chuck East Lee says, any names for potential staff, mainly looking for coordinators, strength and conditioning, or general manager. He's checking in from Walled Lake, Michigan. General manager, a lot of the support staff people, I know that, like I said, Fitzgerald has in mind some people that he's been wanting for a while to come with him on a project like this. But the fact is, he's not coming from a sitting coaching staff where you would bring all the people with you. He's not necessarily going to do that. I wouldn't be surprised initially if he keeps the support staff that is in place right now, keep them in place for another 6 months to a year or whatever. And because you're not going to come in and be able to, because right now Michigan State has support staff like every other program. They've got scouting reports on a lot of people that are going to, I think probably everybody, and people that maybe they anticipate going into the portal. That portal scouting is done all year. There's people doing it around the clock right now. Those people are at Michigan State. If you're Pat Fitzgerald, you can't bring in your own crack staff right now and get started on that type of evaluation. I suspect that Fitzgerald's going to utilize what's in place. And that includes people that are involved with transfer portal, the current general manager, and the people that they have over there right now. I suspect a lot of those people, he'll hang on to those guys initially. A lot of them, you don't know their names, but I suspect that's what you'd want to keep those people. Strength coach, usually you're bringing in your own guy for that. I suspect that'll be the case. Coordinators, I got to tell you, Phil Parker and Max Bullo were the first people that I thought of. And I'm sure he already has an opinion on Joe Rossi also. He's coached against him. I hear he likes Rossi, but I suspect Rossi might stick around as linebackers coach. And I mentioned earlier, I think Wozniak's got a good chance to stick as tight ends coach. And Fitzgerald's always been a big proponent of the tight end position at Northwestern. He called it the superback. Will they use that type of player in this offense? Wouldn't doubt it. Panchero Spartan from Frandor says, Jim, what are your opinions on some of the staff Fitz will seek? Defense coordinator and offense coordinator. I just answered that. Desert Spartan 1 from Chandler, Arizona. Commercial free here. Well, no, that's a lie. We do commercials now. I'll get to that question from Chandler, Arizona here in a moment. But first, ladies and gentlemen, you're aware of the Roback collection. Roback, there's only two ways to describe Roback, and that's best fit and best feel. For those that aren't familiar with Roback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable active wear, ladies and gentlemen. Roback, RHOBACK. And Roback has released some great new licensed items from within the Roback Game Day collection. There are new novel polo designs and clean hoodie and quarter zip designs from some of your favorite teams, including Michigan State University. And there are new novel polo designs in the clean hoodie look from other teams as well. It's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. It's comfortable, ladies and gentlemen, not just hoodies and quarter zips. But check out the everyday shorts and Delta Performance pants. Super comfortable, elastic waistband, and great fabric. Roback. It's the best. High-end stuff. And I got a promotional code for you. Promotional code MSU20. MSU20. That's at roback.com. RHOBACK.com. Roback. You see how it's spelled right there. Roback.com. Use that promotional code for 20% off, just in time for the gift-giving season. MSU20 is the promotional code. And also, if you've not signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3, and you will get up to $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. And then you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code ON3. That's ON number 3 when you sign up. Bonus code ON3. And you can get this deal up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. So make this college football legendary. Make it one for the history books. Make it legendary. Go to betmgm.com for terms. 21 and over only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Or in Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. In Massachusetts, call 1-800-327-5050. In Iowa, call 1-800-BETS-OFF. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you've not signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. We love the people at Roback. Love the people at Shoeban. We'll tell you about Shoepan here in a second. But first, let's talk a little bit about Michigan State football. And like I said at the beginning of the show, today is the first day of the rest of your lives as Michigan State football fans. And I know a lot of you are excited about it. Thanks for joining us here on a late night special edition of SpartanMag Live. Had over 500, 600 people at once tonight. That's good. A lot of Michigan State fans are excited. Desert Spartan from Chandler, Arizona asks, what will Michigan State's football identity be with Pat Fitzgerald, with a Pat Fitzgerald coached team? Hard-nosed defensive front, punishing rushing attack. You know, at Wisconsin, they were never really, at Northwestern, they were really never a punishing rushing attack. You know, the way when Barnett was there, they're a little bit more of a finesse running attack. Shotgun, they go under center and short yardage. They were finesse, make you chase them around like Matt Dorsey was talking about. They never really had skyscraper great receivers, but they had some good ones that were just quick and good with their routes. What was that guy's name? Rivers? Was it Austin Rivers? Like a slot receiver that had like 15 catches. Michigan State could not cover him with a fishing net, as Izzo would say. They got a lot out of 2.5 3-star recruits there, and some occasional 4s. Defensive front, they always had tough linebackers. I remember, even when, this would have been when Randy Walker was there, but they had a linebacker that when he came on blitzes, I remember one time T.J. Duckett was taking him out on blitz. I'm like, this, and he like knocked Duckett back. You know, just your average meat and potato linebacker, you know, but tough. That guy was kind of a, I don't know, kind of a Jordan Turner type of guy. I can't remember names. I remember they had that, who's the Italian guy? Graziano, the defensive end they had a couple years ago. 3-star, but could turn the corner and was just an excellent pass rusher. Identity. on defense, when they used to have Hankwitz, they were just correct, square, tackle, and they would change the pictures back there in that secondary just often enough. Hankwitz won't be the coordinator now. We've not, if you bring in Parker, we know what that's about. If you bring in Max Bulla, that would be interesting to see what that would become. But yeah, they're going to be toughness. It's going to be correct. They're not going to have penalties. There's going to be a buttoned-up operation, which is what I thought would be the case with Jonathan Smith, and never came to fruition in that way. But it's a good question. Still remains to be seen exactly what that. They got to hire him and get that done. See, I'll get closer here, and it gets blurry. It's not you. You don't have to adjust your television set. I am blurry. It's kind of what I'm feeling right now. I don't know why this has been happening more tonight. I apologize. I know because it's the lighting thing. I don't quite have the usual lighting, so I apologize for those problems we've been having. All right, Doc Spartan from Vegas. He says, any major players you expect to leave? Sure, there'll be major players that leave. Aiden Childs, I doubt he'll be staying around. Nick Marsh, will he be offered as much money this year as he was last year? Maybe not. Will he look to move on? Maybe. Will the new staff fight hard to keep him? Maybe not. Last year, it was very important for Michigan State to hang on to Nick Marsh. Michigan State had gotten bruised losing players in the portal before. Nick Marsh had a really good freshman year. In a lot of ways, he was like the hope and face of the offense, along with Childs. If Michigan State would have lost Nick Marsh last year to the portal, it would have really hurt the psyche of Michigan State fans. Nick Marsh gave a lot of effort this year, did the best he could, but if they lose Nick Marsh, it won't be as damaging to the Michigan State fan psyche as it would have been last year. And you might say, well, that makes no difference. That has no difference on the field. It does. The fans and whether they believe in the juice of the program is important. You've seen in the last 2 months what happens when they turn on you. And if they'd have lost Marsh, it really would have damaged that further. If you lose him this year, it won't be quite as detrimental, I don't think. So that's going to be interesting. I think there could be some reshuffling there. Other major players. Who is a major player at Michigan State? Those two are Mekhi Frazier, running back, has already entered the portal. He didn't play in the last couple of weeks. And, late in the season, remember when he was injured and lost, sat out for a game? I heard from sources that actually he was precluded from going on a trip because, there was something on social media that was negative toward the coaching staff, and Mekhi Frazier liked it on Instagram. And I heard from a source that he stayed home, not because of injury, but because of that social media transgression. And we only saw him play one more game the rest of the season, and shouldn't be a big surprise. Boom, he entered the portal the day after the game. And I suspect that would have happened whether Smith was retained or not. Any coaches you expect to be retained? Doc in Las Vegas asks. I think Joe Rossi's got a chance as a position coach at linebackers coach. I think Wozniak's got a chance at tight ends coach. I think Hawkins has a chance at wide receivers. And one of my personal favorites is Legi Suianoa. But he's going to be in demand, and I'm not sure where he fits in Fitzgerald's overall construct on things. Question from Meat Kurtangs. I see what you did there. Shut up, man. You almost had me because I am not real sharp on things like that. And we all love those things, don't we? Not all of us, but that's all right. Not judging at all. Lidiquiz Leonard says, did anyone from Michigan State's side actually reach out to Brian Kelly, or did he just assume the job could be his? Did someone reach out? I've got it from sources that there was communication. I don't know if it was Kelly communicating to them or Michigan State sending out some fielders to him. So I'm not sure which way that went. Stu Fester says, what's the package of improvements and financial backing to go along with a new head coach? I don't know what the financial backing I can say. Oh, here's another reason why. This is probably the best reason why Michigan State didn't fire Smith earlier. I mentioned around week 9 or 10 that the money had been mobilized. That was the money to buy out Smith, but they needed more money to fund the next head coach and his staff. And by the way, when you bring in a new staff or you get rid of another staff, maybe just the one you're bringing in, you're also paying for their moving expenses. $20,000 for several coaches, that can get up to $500,000, $1 million, $2 million bucks in a hurry. So sources tell me that Jay Batt, being a responsible financial steward of the program, did not want to fire Jonathan Smith unless all the money was raised, all from donors, to pay off Smith and his staff and have the money to hire the next coach and his staff. And it wasn't going to happen until all that money was mobilized. And I think that's pretty responsible. It'd be real easy to just fire the coach in October and then pass the hat and say, okay, guys, where's the money? That's how you get in a Florida State type of situation. So that's another reason why they didn't fire him back, October 30th or whatever. So I don't know what the specifics are on the financial backing. Improvements, they just have to get NIL straightened out. And like I said earlier, it looks like, I know you've heard it before, but I've got more confidence this time that the NIL situation is going to get straightened out. I'll leave it at that, but I think it's got a better chance this time. Pat from Rochester Hills asks, Jim, what are your predictions for the offensive coordinator and offensive defensive coordinator? Do you think anyone from Smith's staff will be retained? I already answered those questions. The Shape from Clinton Township asks, what are your predictions for the staff? Same question. Lakeshore Spartan says, what went wrong Fitz's last 2 years at Northwestern, and how does he fix it to work out here? A few things happened. Talked about that earlier. Hankwitz, their great defense coordinator, retired. The replacement, not as good. Also, Fitzgerald and his longtime offensive coordinator also parted ways. He pretty much fired him, brought in a new offensive coordinator. I'm not as expert on what happened there with him. Also, when the transfer portal thing was going on, Northwestern was not in a position to bring in a lot of players because of the academic thing. They only had academic requirements. They only had like 5 or 6 incoming transfers that year at a time when other teams were bringing in 10, 12 or more. So a combination of the transfer thing, not really having everything there, losing Hankwitz. And also you had the players. Remember when the Northwestern players tried to unionize and Fitzgerald spoke out against that. And I wasn't there, but I've heard that could have hurt camaraderie and chemistry in the locker room as well. And of course, the scandal, the hazing scandal, it hadn't come public yet, but if that was going on internally, that might have hurt team chemistry as well. So fair question, and I'm sure he had to answer for that, and he'll be asked about that at his introductory press conference when he is hired, assuming that he is hired and everything looks like that's happening. Anton, 1999 from Waterford, Michigan says, what, if anything, are you hearing about potential new staff and retention? I'm not hearing much about new staff members yet at this time. MSU DeBest says, how will the donations play into getting better players? Since technically you can just donate money to players, you can't. Since technically you can just donate money to players for pay-for-play. I think you meant to say you can't just donate money for pay-for-play. Great question. I don't know the answer to that. Because money is coming in, and the rules are supposed to say now that you can't just put that money for NIL. The NIL money has to be legitimate name, image, and likeness, commercial, fair market value. And I've heard that the clearinghouse, Deloitte, those people are sticklers. Like the NIL people are like sick of Deloitte. They're like, man, they're flagging everything. Not just at Michigan State, but I've talked to somebody who handles NIL for other schools, and they're just flagging everything. And that person thinks it's going to get challenged in court. And Deloitte, NCAA, or whatever it's called, College Sports Commission or whatever it's called, they think that that's going to lose in court. NCAA and College Sports Commission doesn't think so. Meanwhile, the NCAA and is it College Sports Commission? I don't know what the acronym is. It's new. I haven't memorized it yet. They're getting every school to sign a petition or a contract, not a petition, a contract, that kind of like signs your life away, meaning that you will adhere to these rules. And I know Texas Tech is against it. Texas Tech's like, screw you, man. We got Billy Bob Oil down here. We're just paying money all these oil. We got a good team now. We're not playing your rules. It's not going to hold up in court. We're doing it our way. So there's a standoff right now. So you're asking, since technically you're not allowed to just donate money, how will donations play into getting better players? Not sure. I've heard that Bat hasn't told me this, but I've heard that Bat has designs on using corporations and Michigan State's corporate partners, whether it be insurance companies or Pepsi, which is the Michigan State's a Pepsi school, for actual commercials, and they expect to get aggressive and creative with that. I don't know the specifics. Jeff in Franklin, I think that's Franklin, Michigan, he says, What do you feel were the key pitch points from bat to Fitz and vice versa? I think Fitz did a lot of the pitching. I think Fitz, without probably looking desperate, was emphatic about everything he wanted to do as a coach to get a second chance. Pitch points from Bat, I don't think Bat had to pitch much at all, except for probably to demonstrate to him that NIL was going to get taken care of. And I continue to say that Michigan State needs a training table cafeteria, massage pods and clearance to do that, red light therapy, cold plunge, just a lot of things about recovery and prevention. I'm not a doctor, physician, or therapist, but Michigan State's soft tissue injuries has made a lot of people wonder in recent years. So sauna, it's a big part. There's things like sauna and red light therapy are high performance athletes are utilizing these things. And recruits expect them. Will you lose a recruit to these things? Maybe here and there. You need to show them that you have these things. And then most importantly, you need them for performance. Michigan State's not there right now. It's a nice building, but it needs to be plugged in with those things. I suspect Fitzgerald will see that. And he's a guy that'll get things done and push fundraising for specific things like that. Brez from Austin, Texas says, I'm cautiously excited about Fitz, but I'm also interested about what happened with Jeff Brom. Did his interest wane after contacting us weeks ago? Did he not have a good interview with J-Bat? Was he using us as leverage for Louisville, or was it something else? There was never an interview. There was some contact. I'm not sure what cooled it off, but Michigan State dipped their toe in that water, and it's my understanding from good sources that Brom was very much interested. But I just think Fitzgerald was a better fit. Brom, and I think Fitzgerald was a better fit too, because Brom's a little bit prickly. Brom would be more of a mercenary professional coach coming in here, and why would he be leaving his alma mater? I heard that there was some stuff from the administrative level that he didn't quite appreciate. Whenever somebody feels a little bit disrespected by a superior, that's when they leave a job when you wouldn't expect them to do that. He was interested. And then we started hearing 2 or 3 weeks ago that, Brom was on the verge of renegotiating and re-upping his contract. And I'm like, okay, they found out that some schools are serious about him. And we'd heard that, Penn State, Florida, and some others were interested in Brom. And that's why Louisville, we heard, remember those weekend reports 2 or 3 weekends ago, that he was in the process of renegotiating. And when you hear reports like that going into a weekend, usually it's going to be a done deal within 12 hours. Well, that weekend came and went, and nothing happened. And to my knowledge, that contract was not renegotiated. In the meantime, he lost like 3 of his last 4 games? That didn't help. Ended up 8-4. This is a guy that was 8-1 earlier, upset Miami when Miami was number 2. Had it rolling pretty good. And I thought Brom was excellent at Purdue. But he'd be more of a professional mercenary type, whereas Fitzgerald's going to be a program rah guy, go green, And just me personally, what Brom did at Purdue was excellent, and he's had some moments at Louisville. But for Michigan State and I think Fitz. So, 06 grad from Elkton, Michigan says, was this coaching move caused by Michigan State's big-time donors? And if so, Ishbia, ? One of the Ishbias was involved initially. I don't know how much Matt was. There are some big-time donors. I don't know specifically who they were that were the big dogs getting this done. Michael 23 says, what are you hearing regarding the massive donation? I'm hearing it's massive. And I'm hearing that some of it is going to go toward improvements for Spartan Stadium, Breslin Center, and Jenison. As far as Breslin, I heard some whispers about improved, among other things, improved like luxury suites. I suspect those are potential money makers. They could be getting more money out of those. I think that's part of the situation. Fort Worth, Texas, Ivy Covered Halls says there's smoke about the $400 million donation. Can you give any insight into this number? When will it come, and what will it be used for? I just mentioned what it'll be used for, what I'm hearing from a decent source. I'm hearing it's going to be announced. The plans were for it to be announced for the Duke basketball game coming up this weekend. That'll be a big one. Michigan State hockey this weekend also. Holy cannoli. Pat Fitzgerald. It's the first day of the rest of your life as a Michigan State football fan. The first day of the rest of your football life. Sherlock from Sterling Heights says, what's this I'm hearing that we're GPing after Randy Bates, current defense coordinator of Pittsburgh, and our defensive coordinator since he was on the previous Northwestern staff? Not heard that. I wouldn't doubt that. Bates has done a good job there at Pittsburgh. Been there for a long time. What's this area that we're going after? Going after Randy Bates as our DC since he was on the previous Northwestern staff. I don't doubt that. I'll have to look into that. Good question. Sherlock with some clues there. As a matter of fact, do this number. In the meantime, I'm going to save that one. That's a good question for me to look into. Having fun. Going to wrap this up here soon. We still have a lot of watchers and listeners right now, even though we're past midnight. I don't want to remind people that we're past midnight. But I will take a nice look at Lake Michigan and remind you that Shupan, as you know, Michigan's recycling rate has fallen from 90% to 73% in recent years. Michiganders are squandering $105 million per year by not taking back their bottles and cans, and that's hurting our environment, our beautiful environment, like beautiful Lake Michigan, the most beautiful lake on the planet, and ranked number one in the SpartanMag Great Lakes Power Rankings, Lake Michigan, ladies and gentlemen. And it's hurting our environment, not taking back bottles and cans. So help the environment, help yourself, help your beaches. They're your lakes, your roads, your beaches. Take them back. Take those bottles and cans back. Take them back. It's your dime, and it's worth your time, and it's going to help us. Take them back. That's a message from Shupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling. And Shupan is dedicated to your Michigan State Spartans. That's a good one right there. How about Lake Huron, ladies and gentlemen? How about Lake Huron? Let's hear it for Lake Huron. It was number one in the Great Lakes Power Rankings for 5 years. And it wants another crack at the title. Anyway. Lake Huron. Brad in Grosse Pointe says, what will move the needle more for Michigan State? Having its crap together with NIL and facilities? Or changing from Smith to Fitzgerald? Ooh, that's a big one. That's an essay question. Speaking of Lake Superior, YT Sparty is saying, no, it's actually J.K. McKay is saying Superior is king. And J.J. McKay, he's up there in the Keweenaw. I do love Lake Superior, and I didn't go up there this summer, darn it. But last time I was up there was 12 months ago for the Northern Michigan game, and it is beautiful, it's nice. And talked to Izzo a little bit the day after the 50th anniversary of the Edmund Fitzgerald, when the Gales of November came early. I asked Izzo, the most famous Uber ever, if he remembered the day the Gales of November came early. Wind gales, not girls. Not that there's anything wrong with that either. And Izzo said he remembers he was in the dorms at the time. And he at Northern Michigan. And he said he and Mariucci, he said he was on the bottom bunk and Mariucci was on the top, maybe the other way around. And he said usually the alarm clock goes off to music, the local music station. But this time the alarm went off and it was news of the Edmund Fitzgerald having sunk and gone down. And it had left Marquette, I think with iron ore, and out toward Whitefish Bay and went down. So it had left Marquette So that's about as close as you can get to a Edmund Fitzgerald experience for Tom Izzo. And he didn't say he knew anyone that knew anyone. I didn't ask him if he did, but he didn't really relay that. I asked him about the townspeople. He said back then he didn't deal with the town a whole lot. So he couldn't really relay what the townspeople were going through or any of that. But an interesting time 50 years ago, a couple of weeks ago, we had that on video here on a post-practice media briefing, and I asked him about that one. But that's just a nod to get you Gumi over here because J.J. McKay was talking about it. All right, back to Brad and Gross Point. What will move the needle more for Michigan State having its crowd together with NIL and facilities or changing from Smith to Fitz? Got to have your crowd together on NIL. Doesn't matter if it's Fitz or what, coach. If the NIL situation is what it was for Smith's first 2 years, it's not going to work for anybody. So you got to get that together. And the NIL was in, and then it wasn't, and then it is, and then it wasn't. And like I wrote in an article that I posted tonight, problem was Michigan State with their recruiters did not know at any given time how much money they had to work with. So they didn't know what to tell people in the portal. They didn't know what to tell people that are trying to hang on that were going in the portal. They weren't sure all the time. So facilities, the facilities are not bad. They just need to be better. Nutrition needs to be better. Nutrition can get a lot better at Michigan State. I'm not going to give specifics on that, but it's not as good as it was in the 1990s, okay? So, man, which one will move the needle more? You need both. I don't have a good answer for that. All right, Deep South 70 from Alpharetta, Georgia says, have you heard any of Izzo's thoughts or knowledge of his involvement in this process? No. He's had some opinions on candidates in the past. I'll tell you right now that Izzo's always loved Pat Shurmur, but it just never worked out timing-wise. This one, it was a difficult situation. I don't know. He offered support for Smith. I don't want to speak for him. I don't know for sure what's going on there. But involvement, he was not out front in searching for a candidate like he was the year that they hired D'Antonio. That year, Izzo, Hollis, and Haller handled the coaching search. And Luana was in it a little bit too. Luana was interested in Saban, trying to bring him back. And then, there was some talk about Charlie Baggett. And Todd Grantham was in there. Brian Kelly. Luana liked Brian Kelly a little bit back then when he was at Central Michigan. I think she liked him quite a bit. Izzo looked into Charlie Strong when he was defensive coordinator at Florida. And he called Urban Meyer to ask him about Charlie Strong. And Izzo and Urban Meyer struck up a conversation about the Michigan State job back then, and that's when Urban Meyer told Izzo that he would have walked to take the Michigan State job from Bowling Green if it had been offered to him. Didn't really, and then Urban Meyer shared that story a few months ago that Michigan State called him and told him that he was out because they wanted a bigger name coach or something like that. So Urban Meyer took the Utah job, soon went 12-0, then went to Florida, and the rest is history there. But from those conversations, Izzo and Urban Meyer struck up a pretty good collegial colleague relationship to the point that they're friends now. So did Izzo have any input on this? Not to my knowledge, but like I wrote in an article that was posted a couple hours ago, you can bet he had veto power. He's like a one-man House of Lords. If something didn't pass the smell test, he could stamp it out. So Fitzgerald, smell test, you can bet that Izzo gave that one a thumbs up. Was Izzo sad to see Smith go? Yeah, Izzo never likes to see any coach go, especially in 2 years. And Izzo defended Smith for a long time. All right. Desert Green from Cave Creek, Arizona says, I love the Fitz hire. Offense under Fitz, one legitimate concern, he says, I've seen raised is that Fitz will run the same gimmicky nickel-dime offense he ran at Northwestern. I'm hoping with the talent level he'll now have at East Lansing, that won't be the case. Good question. I would agree with you. The nickel-dime stuff was effective for what they had, and there were times when it gave Michigan State fits, no pun intended. But I always thought that Northwestern, I always waited for him as a defensive coach, a linebacker. I always thought that Northwestern might revert more back to a Gary Barnett, between the tackles, ground and pound system, and it never happened. And I agree with you. Fitzgerald knows his schedule and his roster better than I do, and he knows football better than I do. But I always kind of thought, I was always kind of waiting for Northwestern to morph more toward trestle ball than it ever did. But I agree with you. I'd have to say I'd be disappointed if it remained nickel dime finesse style at Michigan State. That being said, you go and watch. A lot of people were really high on someone like Bob Chesney at Holy Cross, and then now at James Madison. They do a lot of nickel dime stuff. You watch, Memphis, some of these hot coaches do a lot of those things. Northwestern's was a slightly different flavor of it, but I agree with you. I would hope it would have evolved from that. I think college football in general is evolving a little bit away from that. You saw Michigan go 15-0 with more of a between the tackles power type program. But I don't disagree with that. Shafe from Grand Ledge, Shafee says, was Braum a serious candidate or was it an agent play for an extension? Any other serious candidates besides Fitz? I already talked about that. It never really went much further with anyone else. Superman says, will Rossi move into the head football coach office tomorrow and take advantage of having his own bathroom? I doubt it. Troutfitter, yeah, says, I like that. Troutfitter, dude, if you are a fly fishing guide, reach out to me and Paul, man. We got to talk. Got to get up north and or wherever you are. Plan some excursions. Maybe we can get a discount. Troutfitter says, what did Fitz do the last 2 years to make us a winner? His record is not great. Can he win championships and why? Go green. Will he say go green after interviews? He will say go green after interviews. And I'm wondering if he'll ever accidentally say go Cats. And if he does, people will be all right. As long as he corrects it right away. What did Fitz do the last 2 years to make us a winner? To make us a winner? He didn't make. I think you're asking why did the team struggle so badly in those 2 years? I talked about that a few minutes ago. This is why usually I go through these questions ahead of time, and so I don't repeat them. I get a lot of repeat questions. His record is not great. Can he win championships? Championships, playoffs, championships. You're talking about a Big Ten championship. A Big Ten championship. Talking about a Big Ten championship. Back in 1987, when George Perlis won a Big Ten championship, Michigan State's first since, basically Darrell Rogers 78, 79 kind of did. Really the first since 66. Back then there were how many teams in the Big Ten? 10. How strong was the Big Ten? Not very strong. Back in the 80s, the strength of the nation was not Michigan and Ohio State. It was Miami, Florida State, Notre Dame, Oklahoma. They were on a completely different level than the Big Ten teams. You win the Big Ten. Back then in 87, Michigan State was number 10 team in the country. A lot easier to do then. Now, superpowers, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan a couple of years ago. USC's probably back on the rise. Penn State, going to be back on the rise. Indiana for now. 18 teams. In order to win the Big Ten now, you got to be the number 1 team in the country or the number 2 team in the country. At worst, the number 3 team in the country. So if you're talking about a Big Ten championship, what you're asking me is, can he finish the regular season number 3 in the country ever? I know D'Antonio did it once. I know Indiana's doing it right now. But odds are against it. Just want to break that to you. And if Michigan State ever finishes the season number 3 in the country, they are hitting at a 99.9 percentile of their ceiling potential. That's hard to do. That's what's expected. That's what they'll be going for. But probably not going to happen. Can he build a team that can make a 12-team playoff? That's hard to do also. You got to finish in the top 4 in the Big Ten, maybe the top 3. And if you're Michigan State, in my opinion, you have to believe you can cycle up to that maybe once every 4 years. People think that's not good enough. Okay, if you're going to make the playoff, you're going to be one of, let's say, 4 teams that are in the playoff. Okay, along with who? Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. So you're saying you should be in there instead of Oregon and USC and Washington and Iowa? Why? Hard to do. Can do it. Expectations are a little bit different than demands. I just laid it out why it's going to be difficult, but I think it can be a guy that can get in the playoff once every 5 years, once every 4 years, which is kind of what D'Antonio would have done. I think D'Antonio would have made a 12-team playoff maybe 5 times in 13 years, maybe 4 times, and that's a legendary Hall of Fame coach, 4 times in 13 years. So that's optimal ratio. Just remember that. Pat from Tampa says, how much influence do you think D'Antonio will have in this, or had in this hire? Did Fitz also have a relationship with Izzo? Izzo and Fitzgerald. There was something that somebody sent me of something that Izzo and Fitzgerald did together. Also, I remember back in 2023 when Michigan State was searching for a coach, and Izzo was down on the field for the Michigan State game at Iowa. Alan Haller was up in the press box, by the way. I think Izzo was with Greg Williams. And Izzo might have been talking to Phil Parker a little bit that weekend. And on the field before the game, Izzo runs into Pat Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald's not coaching anymore, but his son's on the Iowa team. And Izzo and Fitzgerald chummed it all together. Yeah, they're 2 peas in a pod, like carrots and peas. So, yeah, there's a relationship there. Not saying they're best friends, but they will be. But, yeah, Fitzgerald definitely passed the smell test with Izzo. D'Antonio did too. Like I said earlier, whether they were asked about it, I don't know for a fact. We may find out at the press conference. I suspect they were. And, yes, they value Izzo. You may remember Guskowitz, when he hired an athletic director, Izzo called Nick Saban to ask Saban about J-Bat. And I'm not sure that hire gets made without Izzo's House of Lords approval. It's a one-man House of Lords, as he should be. Got no problem with that. From Kalamazoo, Anton Chigurg Spartan says, do you believe there's any main strat in mind for Fitzgerald to execute in the portal? Will he go for Midwest Big Ten transfers, group of sixes, maybe a mix, etc.? Hopefully better than what Smith did portal-wise. I don't know. That's way down the road. He said something in that ESPN interview, talked about how he's been studying the portal and the way to navigate it and strategies. I don't know specifically what that's going to be, but he's going to have a plan, as you would hope. All right, what do we have here? We've got M4 MSU says, any reactions from the recruiting area, namely high school coaches, potential transfers, etc.? Has Fitz already been recruiting in anticipation of landing a job somewhere? Mooby said something about it here, something about recruiting going on. No, I've not heard anything about from coaches, but that'll be forthcoming. Note to self. By the way, I see I am a red shirt, but in truth, I used to get your paper reports back in the 90s. That said, first day here today. Always loved your reports. Go green. Thanks a lot, MS for MSU. Looks like he joined yesterday. So he's been with us for 2 days. So that's a new subscriber. Thank you for posting, and thank you for being a SpartanMag purchaser way back in the 1990s and coming with us here. You're a redshirt level magger at this point, meaning you're an entry level newcomer, but you've been a SpartanMag supporter for a long time. Appreciate that. And that's a new subscriber. So those of you that are interested in subscribing, come over to SpartanMag.com. Half off. It's like $53 or $56 for the year. And with it, you get a full year access also to the Athletic. SpartanMag.com, the On3 Network, all of that, half off right now. Go do it. It's the best deal ever. From Rockford, Michigan, Stoic Spartan 01, he says, what non-negotiables did Fitz have going into the hire, and what assurances did Michigan State give to make sure he's not shafted like Smith? Good question. What non-negotiables did he have? I'm close on a lot of these things. I'm not close enough to know those things, other than Fitz really, really wanted this job. And I suspect rather than non-negotiables and demands, he probably said, this is what I'm going to need, and this is what I'm going to do to help us get that. Knowing Fitzgerald was probably more along those lines than, well, if you want to hire me, you better have, because that's not the way he is. Stoic Spartan 01 from Rockford, Michigan also says, why were there mixed feelings execution on giving Smith the resources promised? There wasn't really mixed feelings. Michigan State was just disjointed, just not organized enough. Sparty 1981, Brian from Flushing, Michigan says, how serious a contender was Chesney at James Madison for this job? He reached out to Michigan State according to your Hot Board article, but do you know how much interest was reciprocated back from Michigan State? I do not know how much was reciprocated back to Michigan State. I just heard through professional industry channels that they had kind of reached out and said, hey, we would be interested in talking. So I'm not sure how far that went. That's a source. I'm not sure if it went from Michigan State's direction. Also heard that, like we said earlier, Jim Mora was interested as well. Grumbling Greenie says, Comp, did I read somewhere earlier that Fitz was expecting and planning for this job for the past 2 years? Please expand on that. I don't know that he was planning for this job. He was planning for a job for 2 years. And Grumbling Greenie from Saginaw also says, also, I would like you to do a deep dive on the issues Fitz had at Northwestern that led to his departure and how all of that will be interrogated, investigated, and vetted before the hire to Michigan State happened. How much it was vetted? That's a great question. I'm sure that'll come up in the press conference. Let's see here. I got something here. I did talk to Louis Vaquer, the publisher of the Northwestern website on Rivals.com, now part of On3.com. I talked to him about Fitzgerald like 4 or 5 weeks ago when all this was starting to bubble. I thought this could happen. And he says, Louis thought the lack of being able to recruit a quality quarterback, really bit him over the last couple of years. He said they made a couple of bad hires. At DC, the defense coordinator was a disaster, and he fired him after 2 years in the last 2 years. I'll look more into this later, but you asked about the issues, the scandal. Basically, Northwestern couldn't prove that he knew, or I can't remember the exact phraseology on that, but you can bet that was all. I don't know the particulars on how that was vetted, but you know that came up. That's a good question. Spartan 906 says, is the $400 million to improve the training tables? No, but some of it should go toward that. Mike in Riverdale says, how real was the Braum stuff? Was it agent using it as some leverage, or was he a realistic candidate? I spoke about that earlier. Are we going to do what's necessary to keep Milivojevic? I think so. I think Alessio really likes Michigan State. His father was very upset at the firing of Jonathan Smith, thinks it's a big mistake. That being said, I know his father is an assistant coach in the Chicagoland area, and he and some of his staff members they've crossed paths with Fitzgerald, so he's going to know Fitzgerald real well. And Milivojevic's dad, and I'm sure Alessio himself is upset about the firing. But if I were a betting man, which I'm not, I think that they'll keep him. 312 Acre says, was the alleged $400 million donation predicated on Fitz being hired? How influential were donors in making this hire more than normal? They were influential. I've said all along that the donors have not been bull in the china shop type donors. They're like, you better do this or I'm going to knock over all these teacups or china cups and plates. You better do this or I'm not T. Boone Pickens. There was none of that. However, this could not have been done without the donors. So their money was there. They were interested, had to be sold on it, and they pushed for it. So it was in there. Does the $400 million have anything to do with it? I'm not sure. Kirby88 says, what's your percentage odds that Fitz will be addressing the crowd Tuesday night at Breslin? I'm going to say 90%. All right, and that's it. We appreciate all the questions. We're about ready to wrap it up right now. We appreciate all the people that have been hanging with us, watching us well past midnight. We appreciate Lake Huron. We appreciate Chupan and Roback. On 3. SpartanMag. Do we have one more super chat coming in late? I think we do. Let's get the applause meter out. There we go. Young Feezy Baby, 1436. Young Feezy Baby. He posts a lot over at SpartanMag.com. Underground Bunker, and he's posting here today, and he says, wild day for me here in Oxford, comp. Wild day. Excited for this week and the staff hires. So Young Feezy Baby is excited. Glad he's happy. Glad he's having a good day. And I appreciate all the posts over here. I hope there weren't too many trollers. I agree with those, that there's no such thing as someone who checks all the boxes, but I think this is an exciting time, and I think you're going to see a buttoned-up operation and an invigorated Pat Fitzgerald taking over the Michigan State program. And we'll be covering everything that goes on over at the Underground Bunker message board and SpartanMag. Become a subscriber. We'd love to have you over there. I'm having trouble finding a way to turn this thing off. I can't get the screen. We might just have to go all night. I can't turn it off. Why is this happening? I can't get down here on this thing. There we go. I guess that'll work. There we go. Now we're ready to sign off. I've got my snow shovel outfit on. Had a good day today. Appreciate all the subscribers and all the support at SpartanMag over the years, and the great help we got from the super chats today. I mean, big time super chats. Was it, of course, C.B. Stevenson coming through big, man. Really appreciate that. That helps. I'm not kidding. Caleb Tallman, Blong John, appreciate him. Appreciate Tanker Jag and Hank Graper, all you guys, man. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it. We'll be back sometime soon. We haven't had one of these in a long time. We'll do one with Big Move coming up soon as we continue to cover Michigan State and the coaching change and what's next for Michigan State football. We'll be there covering it at SpartanMag.com. Become a Magger. Get over there, people. Become a Magger. We'll see you next time. Everybody take care. Have a great week.